What is up, weirdos? Jeremy Grinsteiner, your host of the Weird and Strong podcast, here for another exciting episode where we get to talk and dive into the weird things that people are doing in the world, the unconventional, the great things. And this week, I've got a great friend of mine who we've been friends for 20 plus years at this point, and it was fantastic to be able to have this conversation with her in a way that we hadn't before. She is a coach. She is a musician. She runs a business making Varenyky, which are a type of a pierogi, the dumpling. And so she does all kinds of amazing things, following her passions and just being an all-round awesome human being. We've got Brandi Dorval on the podcast. I'm so excited for you to get to know her and listen to her story. So with that, let's get weird, folks. All right, welcome back to the Weird and Strong podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Grinsteiner, and today we've got Brandi Dorval with us today. How you doing, Brandi?
I'm wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. It's great to talk to you. It's been a minute since we've talked, so this will be a great opportunity to reconnect and see what's going on with you today.
Awesome. I'm excited to get started.
As we start everybody here on the Weird and Strong podcast, I got a weird question for you. Are you ready?
I am.
Awesome. Let's say we took you and we turned you into a digital version of yourself and installed you onto a computer. What software would you be?
Interesting question.
Told you it was weird.
I know. You're asking this to the most un-IT person ever.
Most un-IT person that works in or worked in IT?
I'm not necessarily in IT. I'm
around IT.
Around IT. IT adjacent.
Yeah.
Okay, the first thing, we're going to go with the first thing that popped into my head, and this is going to be weird. Excel, because I like to organize things. Very rigid in that way.
Be a good old spreadsheet.
A good old spreadsheet. Reliable,
predictable.
Yep. Exactly.
Calculating.
Yep.
Cool. That's, besides being the first thing that came to mind, is there any other reason that drew you towards that answer?
Years of working in it. I think it's familiarity of the program.
It's an old glove that you know real well.
Absolutely. Like, I won't use a calculator. I'll pull up Excel to do stuff. Yeah. Because I know it. It's easy.
I once had a mentor and supervisor, or boss, if you will. I was laying everything out in spreadsheets, and it was like a marketing plan, calendar plan and stuff. And he's like, "Can you just put it on a calendar?" He's like, "Not everybody thinks in spreadsheets like you do." I was like, "They don't?"
Right?
So
I come across that too. Like, can you put this in an actual like PowerPoint presentation? I was like, no, I don't think in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Don't make me think in PowerPoint.
It's a little more like engineering brain than artistic brain.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's talk more about Brandi. Let's go on the journey of first of all, let's talk about the things that make you unconventional, the ways that you show up in the world that may be weird.
So for a long time, until you helped me realize that this isn't weird, or not weird, but I grew up around my grandparents a lot. So I know I'm a pretty good cook, know how to like sew and crochet and all of the non-conventional things that like the rest of my friends don't know how to do. So people think it's really cool. So I've started to branch out and lean into that a little bit more. So we started a Varenyky business in 2020, mostly because I was bored. So for listeners that don't know what that is, and they're also called pierogi, so they're a little stuffed dumpling with various things. So, working through that. Also, a couple of friends just wanted to learn, so I started a cooking show during COVID. Haven't done that lately, but I'm going to pick that back up in the fall once everything else slows down. I'm also in a band. I coach Olympic weightlifting, just essentially just staying really busy with different projects. I don't like to sit still very long, always learning. Just started some breathwork certification earlier this week. Just enjoy learning and continuing to put positivity out in the world, either through food or coaching.
That's very cool. So what I'm hearing is a genuine, or like a definite through line in that is that you're always one to follow the things that you're interested in, whether they make sense or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because combining somebody who has an established career with cooking and coaching and breath work and Olympic lifting, all of these things combined, or like looking at all of these things next together, they don't necessarily have a lot in common, aside from you.
Except for me, yeah, definitely.
And music, of course, adding that into
and music.
the mix. So talking through, like, I find it interesting that you have you went right away to the spaces that maybe people would find more traditional and conventional, of like the cooking and sewing and things that were like, if we rewind back 100 years, the norm. And so it's interesting that you are considering yourself unconventional, doing very conventional things.
Correct. But it's almost in the last, well, especially growing up like 90s to 2000s as the unconventional, right? It's a lot easier to go get something from McDonald's or go out to eat, right? So that art was lost until COVID hit, where you did have those options, right? So something that I took was just like, okay, I do it, right? And I've had other people tell me that, that no, it's a skill. And I'm like, I've been doing it since I was 5. Like it's, and then having my friends going, okay, I'm starving. I don't know how to cook for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Like I can't eat another frozen pizza or a box of mac and cheese.
Sure. Was there a moment where friends would say those types of things and you go, "Oh, what do you mean?"
Oh, absolutely. Still to this day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my aunt is unfortunately ill, and my family was like, hey, can you do meal prep? Like, oh, got this, right? Bulk food. And I just had some people over that said, hey, yeah, I'll help. And like, how do you do that? Like, oh, okay, yeah, let's make this into a teaching experience instead of me just flying around the kitchen trying to get all of this done. So that, that's cool, where, I can take some of the coaching side, right? So, what I've learned through fitness and teach others how to become healthier with their food choices, right? And you don't necessarily have to go out and not know what's in your food.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have you learned along that journey of helping teach people about their food and how to cook food?
That I shouldn't take what I know for granted, right? Even with people that have grown up around it, right? And food is something that I pick up easily, like making new recipes and that kind of stuff, unless it's baking.
Yeah.
Baking is out of my norm. That's too rigid. I don't like to measure things.
But baking is science and chemistry.
Right. Not my deal. But I don't know. I don't know what I've learned. It's a wild journey. Like I said, I take a lot of stuff for granted that I just grew up with it. So it's just there, and it's not there for a lot of other people.
Got it. So, why Varenyky? Why make a business and provide that to the world? Well, what was the driver for that?
Complete coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
So
tell us that story.
Right. So I was looking for recipes for because I was bored. Right. Going from playing shows 3 weekends a month to the COVID environment and having to slow down and just like, what does one do on your weekend when you're not playing for 4 hours and setting up and driving to towns? Started going through some old emails my aunt sent from my grandma's cookbooks. Right. When my grandma got dementia, unfortunately, a lot of her recipes that she traditionally made, they weren't lost. They're still there, but no one knew how to make them, right? In the true, old Czech style, the recipes were like things, but not necessarily measurements of those things, right?
Sure.
Throw this stuff in a pot and you get food.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I tackled kolache, right? So
Mhm.
no one had made that in probably 8 years since, my grandma got sick.
Mhm.
Figured that out. It took a couple batches, hence baking, right? Science.
Yeah.
There were some pretty bad ones. And then during that process, like they sent me a whole bunch of recipes and I threw them in a folder, said, hey, I'm going to get to them later. I didn't get to them, right? Until COVID hit. And I opened it up and I was like, hey, let's make I was looking for a specific recipe. So my grandma used to make this like dessert during Lent. It had cherries in it.
Hmm.
I don't remember what it was called, right? And so I pulled up the folder and then saw the Varenyky and I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't had these in 20 years, right? So one day I made it
Yeah.
and I posted a picture and everybody's like, I want some.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay. So that was my first stream really, and there was no when I started the stream, the cooking show, um, there was no intention to make a second one,
Oh,
right?
got it.
One of my friends from Jersey was like, "You know how to make those? Can you teach me?" I'm like, sure, yeah, let's just go ahead and I'll pop onto Facebook Live and we can make it together. Like I sent them the list of ingredients and like, yeah, we'll walk through it together so you can ask me questions while you're going through the steps.
Hmm.
Um, and then, we did that, kind of just sat down. They were really good. They were really cheap. They were really easy. I was bored.
Hmm.
So one day I was like, let's see how many I can do by myself.
Yeah.
And made a whole bunch and just posted it online and said, hey guys, this is a comfort food for me. Would anybody else be interested in buying them?
Hmm.
I sold out in an hour. So I was like, oh, well, maybe this is a thing, right? So you started with the first one. I really had a hard time trying to figure out how to get dry cured cottage cheese, so I stayed off of that for a while. Just kind of slowly grew as I had time. And unfortunately, my shoulder, right, it was a lot of manual work. So slowly built, and then thankfully you built me a website. So now we go into batch ordering. We have bags designed. We're waiting for our final cutter. Then we'll have food label bags and potentially be able to ship out of state. So it was just like this weird thing that started because I was bored, right? And it's now turned into this like really cool thing that I get to share my grandma's recipe that, could have been lost because it was just not there. Like no one made them. So
Hmm. What was that moment like? So, you had mentioned that this was 20 years since you had the last batch of Varenyky. What was that first batch that you made like for yourself?
I was a little hard on myself, but I always am of like, these don't look like grandma's, but then you cut into them and you're like, okay, no, I got it. I got it. Right. And then I got to play. And that's where I have fun in the kitchen. Like, hers was just straight potatoes, some salt and pepper, and I was like, how can we make this even more flavorful? So that's how the loaded potato thing happened. So it brought back a lot of memories, like those core food memories of like sitting around during, I keep on bringing up Lent, but that's when we made them. Just being family. Like she would fry, couple hundred of them, and we would just sit as a big group with cousins and aunts and uncles and just hang out and have fun. And we haven't necessarily done that in a while, right? So it was cool to bring those happy memories back of like
Yeah.
hanging out or making them, right?
Mhm.
Because we'd make thousands of them and stick them in the freezer so they'd be ready for a fast meal. So it's carrying on that tradition, but also opening it up to the general public.
Yeah.
Because I know my family wasn't the only one that potentially did that in Western North Dakota.
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of my customers are, right? It's old friends. It's, people from that community that have moved here that's like, I haven't had these either in forever. So it's cool.
Yeah. And then and then also, how many people then you get to introduce this to perhaps for the first time?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So in making all of these these different foods and teaching people, how has that impacted your process and development into being a coach? Or how did that influence that?
It goes hand in hand. The cooking show brought a little bit more confidence because while I've held a lot of coaching certificates, I just never went after it. I just didn't have that confidence. Like, why would anyone listen to me? You know, just that little, to use some enlifted language, a little Billy in the back of my head, right? Of like, what are you doing?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just say, okay, if I can do this, I can do whatever, right? The first, I sold 10 bags and then it was 40. And then there was one Christmas that I didn't close orders. And I think I was making Varenyky up until the night before we left, right? And I'm like, if I never see another piece of dough again, I was so sick of being full of flour. But it goes hand in hand, right? Because I think it's a passion point, right? So just, leaning into cooking and really, exploring that part of my side that I was very much resisting, led me to the next thing I was really resisting, right? Of like, why would anyone want to listen to me? And that's, not the truth. So, yeah, it's a little weird way, but also giving instruction in cooking is similar to giving instruction in weightlifting, right? Do first step, do second step, do third step. So really learning how to explain, especially through the internet when you have no outside interaction other than the chat comment box, you have to be very specific because in the past, and I still do this from time to time, the steps are in my head, but they don't necessarily come out verbally, right? And I'm like, well, you just did that wrong. Oh yeah, I didn't verbalize what I told you steps 1 and 3 and forgot step 2. Okay, let's go back. So I still catch myself doing that today of like, okay, let's slow down. Let's think through the thought process. So I give good instruction. Because sometimes my brain goes way faster than my mouth, right? I'm on step 12 and that's what comes out, but the other steps in between are still there.
I can imagine that there's some complexity also of explaining something as you're doing it and also having to think a few steps ahead of what's coming next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of like, where did I put that? Right. So I usually, when I was doing the stream, had everything like labeled and like pre-measured. So like as a cooking show, you can just dump it in the pot and not think about it. But I mean, even there, sometimes you get flustered of like, oh, I forgot that. And you have to go like shoot across the kitchen to go get it and like try to compose yourself back. You'll be like, okay, I'm not flustered. We're good. So, that's another thing that's really important in coaching too, of like, some days there's stuff that's just not going to go right. Just breathe, work through it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow will be a better day, right? It's still, the end result is still good. You just got there a little bit of a bumpy path.
Yeah. And so in looking at, you talked about this resistance or this imposter that was holding you back from getting into coaching. What was that path like for you to then make that jump into it? What happened there?
It was a push. It wasn't a jump. It was a push of like, you can do this. And I'm like, can I? And like, you're going to do this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm not gonna lie, I still have the imposter syndrome to this day. On some days I'm like, what am I doing? But it was really the confidence. Like, there's people like you and Ellie and everyone at Ice House that, everybody's so supportive or, in my life and everybody that I met there. So, it was like the realization and just telling that imposter syndrome to shut up and just, I can do this. Okay. Yes, I can.
Yeah. I just before we jumped on, I saw somebody make a pretty bold post and claims that said, who doesn't have imposter syndrome? Imposters.
That's a good quote.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and right. Yeah, it's like, are we ever truly free of of that voice from ourselves?
I don't think we are.
Mm-hmm.
I
What?
think as you're learning and trying to be better, that's always going to be there.
Yeah. And so then what do we what do we do, or what do we learn to do?
I've been trying to just shut it, well, not shut it off. Like it's still there, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
never just going to go away, but make a stand of like, no, you're wrong. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Changing the narrative for yourself, or turning the volume down, knowing it's still going to be there. It's just quiet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk to me about breath work, since that's something that's new for you.
It
Um,
is.
what brought you into the realm of breathing, or what interested you there?
And lifted, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be so high strung. Like I was either in like fight or flight or just so down regulated that I couldn't function.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you've seen me through both sides of that manic cycle that I was in. And breath work, a lot of times I fought you on it. I'm like, this is silly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing Wim Hof? Why is this, and every time I would do it 3 days later, I was like, oh, I feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Then, life happens and you miss it or you don't do it. And then, the cycle continues. And, I had a great opportunity to do a class. We did a workshop one Saturday, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was just me and one other person. And we did it and, they got up and like, oh my God, I feel so much better. I'm like, yep, right. And I'm like, and there's like a lot of the stuff I was resistant to. Wasn't brought up on it like this and the RPR stuff and like you try it and you're consistent with it and it helps so much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of just down regulating you. I'm not as reactive. I don't get so angry at stuff when I'm like, this is stupid. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
take a breath. Okay, I see where they're coming from. Let's correct where, the bad misconception, move on, right? So I don't, I learned when you breathe, you don't hold on to stuff, right? It's helps me not spin the stories
Mm-hmm.
that can then continues to make it angry, right? So the breath work thing, it was like I touched the like just the top of the iceberg, right? With the stuff that we went through and stuff that I looked up and I was like, hey, I Googled one day of how many different types of breath work it was, and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna pick one.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go through the certification. Then I'll pick another one, go through the certification, and see what each does, right? Because each has their pros and cons, and they're all based on like a similar thing. I think I can't remember. I think the book is named Breathe.
Yep.
I read that, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like, huh,
Yeah,
okay,
there was actually a previous guest that was just on the show just a while back, Jeff Lester, a part of his community, and that was our book club book for July. So I mean,
okay,
I'm a bit familiar with that book.
okay, yeah. So, yeah, I picked it up on just like wanting to learn more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a big audiobook person from, working at home in the corporate environment. I usually have something on. And it was one of those that I couldn't have on the background, right? So I'd be like typing away and then all of a sudden I would just fully stop and be like, huh, okay. I need to learn more about that. And then I would Google it, and then all of a sudden, like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh no, I'm working. Okay. We'll listen to this later on. And that just kind of sparked the interest, right? Something that is going to be helpful for, the fitness side of my life, the band side of my life, right? So band is essentially strapping on a 5 pound weight, 10 pound weight to your front of your chest and running for 4 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
My sleep, I've never slept better in my entire life. Like I was a chronically bad sleeper
Mm-hmm.
until I started this, so, just trying it and be like, oh, okay, connecting that dot and then connecting that dot and singing too, right?
Yeah.
Proper breath support, right? So I spent years breathing into my chest and not my full diaphragm, right? Keeping all of that bad energy and just flushing that out and being able to make things calm, and like it's improving everything, right? It's just one little change,
Mm-hmm.
full in hills,
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah.
Something that like I said, when you brought it to me, I was like, what? No, that can't work. Oh, okay, you're right. That does
Some,
work. Okay. Yep.
something as I'm willing to bet that this is something that you thought, or that many people listening can think when they hear talking about breath work, is that, well, I already breathe. I already know how to do that. Why would I need to work on my breathing? It's
Right.
something I just do. So what's been the change that you've noticed now that you've gotten exposed to this and you're starting to delve deeper into breath work practice? Of what have you noticed for yourself of how you used to breathe versus how you breathe now?
It's very much full breath, right? And as I'm getting worked up at work or something else, I can feel it shift because I
Mm-hmm.
start talking really, really fast and it's short breaths.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like I'm lightheaded. I'm like, what? Oh, check myself. Okay, take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I've noticed it with others, right? So interesting, like little tidbit. I was on a call and somebody was just like was frustrated and aggravated at the beginning of the call and just started talking faster and
Mm-hmm.
faster and faster and faster. And then like you could tell she was like almost hyperventilating a little bit. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. And she's like, what? I'm like, we're all four of us are just gonna we're gonna pause. We're gonna take a deep breath in, let it out, do it one more time, let it out. I'm like, and you can go. And she immediately slowed down. We were
Yeah.
back on track because she was just spider webbing, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what are we talking about? I can't help you because I don't understand the path of the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would love to help you, just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two people messaged me and was like, that worked.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, use it. Spread the word. Like,
Yeah.
just
Is
something that simple, you know?
so, like, looking back, or looking to an earlier version of yourself, would have you ever thought that you would be in a space where you would be on a corporate business call and coaching somebody through breathing, even in that
No,
small capacity?
no. And it
And
was just funny because it was instinctual.
yeah.
It wasn't like I thought about it and I'm like, oh, maybe I should do this. It was just like, okay, I can't handle this. Like, stop.
Mhm.
Just stop. It was just like, it came out of my mouth and I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And then it was like, no, that was really helpful. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to continue to do that then. Just like
Yeah.
it came because it was just, I was like, I can't. I'm like, either I'm going to drop off this call because I just can't follow. We're not being productive. Let's
Mhm.
throw it out there.
Yeah. For the people who are listening at home that may work in a similar setting in that corporate world, are there any simple practices that they can do throughout their workday to help avoid that overwhelm or that hectic or frantic thought process?
Oh, absolutely. So for me personally, and this is what I teach the people that report to me as well, is like when a call gets done early or you're finding yourself super frantic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just take 5 seconds, just put the headset down, walk away from your desk and breathe, right? If you have 15 minutes, go take a walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the breath. Nothing's that dire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Focus on you. Because if you continue to get worked up, it's going to affect you later on in the day, right? So just walk away 5 minutes, take 5, 10 breaths, right? Probably more five, like if you're going nice and slow,
Yeah.
then come back,
Mm-hmm.
right? See if your perspective changes. If your perspective doesn't change and you're still upset about it, maybe ask me for help, right? Ask somebody for help. Like
Mm-hmm.
get a second opinion on the situation.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Um, you mentioned that you've utilized this for the people that you work with in your corporate career. Uh, what kinds of differences, or like what's been the impact of that you've seen?
We are much more reasonable people.
Mm.
because you work in the corporate space too. Like sometimes like the fast-paced bam 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 environment, right? You
Mhm.
forget to breathe, you forget where you're at. Like today I had from 8 a.m. until I logged on, back to back phone calls, right? So it's really easy to get lost in that, right?
Mhm.
So breathing really like regulates you, and everybody's like, okay, well, am I seeing it from that perspective? And they ask a lot better questions,
Mm.
right? Of just like, okay, I'm not mad. I didn't go to, because I'm worked up. I'm right in that fight or flight. Going to the negative
Mhm.
or going into the bad intention. That's not where most people sit, right?
Mhm.
It's really, oh, I had a misunderstanding of what we were working on. Now that you clarified, I agree with you, or I would do it this way, right?
Mhm.
So, um, it's a lot less go to anger, right? It's a lot less fighting.
Mhm.
It's a more productive conversations, which is really nice in the corporate environment because that sometimes doesn't happen.
Yeah, it can reduce the amount of um, behaviors that can cause resentment or feelings of betrayal or like losing trust. Yeah, and that's so cool that you're doing that in that space and bringing that forward in a way that is very much outside of the norm, outside it's a non-traditional um, way of utilizing that technology of breathing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
And like I said, if you would have asked me years ago, I'm like, well, no, that's not going to help.
yeah.
Oh, it does.
That's so cool that you're on that this portion of your journey now, and that this is a new avenue for you of exploration and expansion. That's so cool to hear. Let's talk a little bit about the music side of things.
Sure.
So we talked about food, talked about cooking, we've talked a little bit about coaching, we've talked about the breath work side of things. Let's talk about music. Just for people to have a background, what do you do as a musician?
So started out in band choir, like a lot of the population. So about, oh goodness, I don't even know. That's a long time ago.
Mhm.
In I want to say 2008, started my first band. So I play bass. I finally got into the vocal side of it. I thought it was very interesting that you sent me the whole like be seen thing right before we started. Um, I was afraid to be seen. Oh my God. If I could have blended into the wall when I first started playing, I did not look at anyone other than my feet. I was
Mhm.
there. I was having fun, but oh, do not look at me. Like it made me so nervous. A couple years ago, finally was like, okay, I have a decent singing voice. I'm not using it. Like, let's branch out. So started backup vocals. So right now, in we started Save Me CJ back up again. So that was a band that we started, I think it was 2009-ish.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Changed the full set list. We have three new members of the band. Just doing, early 2000s pop punk stuff. A lot of rearranging female vocals for Bobby, who's doing our singing. Just going out and having fun. It's all a hobby for us.
Mhm.
It's nice to go out and we kind of paved the way for the upsurgence of the 90s bands that were in town. So just doing something a little bit different, right? A lot of songs you didn't even hear when they really came out in the 2000s, or
Mhm.
if bands did play them, they've kind of fallen off the map, and we're bringing them back, and it's a lot of fun. It's like no pressure. We all get along really well.
Mhm.
It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That's great. You mentioned playing music in school. What was the thing that took it from bringing it back from school time into your adult life?
Aaron, who's my husband, bought me a guitar when we first started dating. Absolutely hated it. Could not figure that thing out, but tried. I tried so hard. I can't chord. My brain just doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
And he was filling in for Dallas's band. I can't even remember what for. And he was playing bass. And
Okay.
he had a bass laying on the bed. And he went to go shower. And I was like, huh. I just picked it up and he had like the tab, like the old school, before
Hmm.
we like could do it on the internet. He had it printed out.
Sure.
And I was like, come back, and I'm like playing the song, and he's like, how did you? I'm like, this makes sense.
Hmm.
Like guitar doesn't make sense. This makes sense. So a couple weeks later, we went and bought a bass and been doing it ever since.
Hmm. And so how long was it from picking it up for that first time to playing your first gig?
It was a couple years.
A couple years.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was in a couple bands that just I was fairly new when we moved to Fargo. One of my first bands in Fargo was playing like Dream Theater and
Oh.
all of this prog rock stuff, and like my hands would cramp, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do these guys, and I freaked out. We had our first show scheduled. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm nope, can't do this. Like, I just walked away from it, right? And then didn't play for a while because I was like, maybe I don't want this, right? And
Hmm.
then I got bored one day. It was sitting there, picked it back up. And then a band out of Dickinson called me, George and the Jungle Joes, if you know
Hmm.
George and those guys. They're like, hey, we need to fill in. I'm like, okay, send me the song list. Learned 45 songs in like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Not, just the bare bone structure. I'm like, guys, this isn't gonna be pretty, right? I haven't played in a while, but sure, right? Played with them for a while. So living in Fargo, drove back and forth. A lot of learning experiences, a lot of fun, saw a lot of stuff. Then moved when that was done. Joined a band in Fargo for a couple of shows, and that turned into Save Me CJ. And that, really from that point on, we did that for 8 years. Um, I decided because I was playing, traveling full time, trying to do the band manager thing. It got too much. I was like, I need a band for a while that I show up, I put my stuff on stage, I take my stuff off stage at night, and they don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
Did that for a couple of years, and then we did the 90s 2000 tribute show with Bobby. Bobby called us up and said, hey, you want to do Pearl Jam? I was like, I don't really know Pearl Jam, but sure. And then we got done and we're like, well, we don't want to stop playing. This was a lot of fun. And so
Hmm.
we just cycled Save Me CJ back up.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
super cool. That's really, really awesome to hear that journey, and that you're still doing that. And in that moment of canceling that first gig, or not wanting to do it and still coming back to it, what was something, what's the thing that you've learned the most out of that path?
The confidence. Just own the stage.
Mm.
Right? And you don't know who's watching. So we were very lucky to get Ribfest one year.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron thought I was gonna just, we set up and there was no one there. We walk on stage and the whole thing was full, right? And we're like, and to see, I looked over and saw Aaron nervous, and I was like, oh, if he's nervous, like, and then some like weird calm hit me, and we played our half an hour. We put everything away, and then I went to go out into the crowd, and there was a group of little kids
Mm-hmm.
sitting there waiting for me, and I was like, not normally kids like grew up around my nieces and nephews and all of my cousins, but not usually my go-to. But this like group of kids would just follow me around. Like I was like, so I just sat and talked to them, and like it's so cool. We don't usually see like because most of them were girls. Like we don't see girls on stage,
Yeah.
right? And like it's cool that we can do this, right? And these are like, anywhere from 5 to 10-year-olds, right? Of like
Mm-hmm.
sisters and siblings. And I was like, that's the time like it changed for me of like,
Mm.
you don't know who's watching.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation too, of even with coaching. You don't know who's watching.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a concept with some folks I've been working with, in 023, where one of the primary things that they talk about is respect your ripple.
Okay.
And because there's so much of what you bring into the world that has a ripple around you, and you get to make that choice of how you want that ripple to be. So there's good research to show that, if one of your best friend's other friends smokes, you have a higher likelihood of smoking as well. And so even though it may not be somebody that you have direct contact with, that their ripple of choosing to smoke still has an influence and an impact on you. And so respecting that your ripple also has impacts on others, and making your choices and bringing yourself forward in ways that truly aligns with who you want to be and what you want to bring into the world.
It's a really cool concept.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look more into that.
Yeah, there's some smart folks over there at 023. Yeah, and it's something that anybody can understand, and it's something that we can all use in our lives to remind ourselves of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we covered a wide swath of those. We haven't necessarily talked about this thing, Olympic weightlifting. You know, we talked about some weird things. Now let's talk about some strong things. What was your path towards Olympic lifting? What was that like? How did you find the sport? How did you get started?
I think you asked me for what, 4 years, and I was like, I don't think so. I'm gonna stay on the powerlifting path, right? Then I hurt myself. First time I've been very lucky through my path and being hypermobile, haven't hurt myself, but I was on stage one night, stepped wrong, managed to have a high ankle sprain, and then got freaked out of the ramifications if I didn't let it heal. So was very, very, very careful. Then COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't go to the gym, right? So that was kind of my sanity point. So I reached out to my old trainer, started doing stuff at home with what I had, right? Trying to find fitness equipment during COVID was awful. So I rehabbed with like little bands for a long time, but then was still scared, right? There was so much drilled into my head, where, if you do it again, then you're gonna need a pin and like all this kind of stuff. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. So I started on my own a little bit, still going through the program, like the online program. And then I think I finally reached out to you and said, okay, I need help. Like, this isn't progressing like I do need, like I need some supervision. And then you announced an Olympic weightlifting class. One of my really good friends messaged me super late at night. I think she knew I am notorious of like answering yes on my Apple Watch when I'm sleeping. So she texted.
She was looking for the automatic yes of, okay, yeah, we're doing this.
Yeah. So she texted me and I was like, okay. And then I vaguely remember like in that like sleep fog of like, okay, somebody texted me last night. Okay, I'm gonna look what I said. And I was like, oh, okay, sweet. And then she's like, yeah, I signed you up and we're already all squared away. I'm like, we're doing what next week? And she's like, yeah, we're signed up for Olympic weightlifting. And I was like, okay, I paid for it. Let's do this, right? And doing it ever since, right? Mm-hmm. Been a long journey, long rehab. My leg is finally stronger than it ever has been. So working on my flexibility, it changed my life, right? It's another confidence thing, right? Of, oh, I can't do that, right? And then one day you throw the weight over your head and you're like, oh, I can do that. Okay, let's add some more weight. Throw that over your head, right? And I saw how much it changed me, and then we slowly started adding people, and I talk about it all the time of like, hey, it doesn't matter if you're 8 years old or you're 50, you can still do it, right? There's some type of modification, we'll do something. And just watching everybody grow and how it's helped everybody is super cool, right? It's not the traditional sport, right? It's a lot of science. Still understanding that, right? I'm very much of this do it. But it's the cool science aspect of it. It's different. The community is very supportive. It's super cool. So
yeah, that's fun, and that's amazing. And in talking with the injury side of things, was When you had that high ankle sprain and you were in the pain and in the discomfort of all of that, could you have ever pictured yourself doing something like you're doing today with weightlifting?
No, I didn't know how I was going to come out of it, right? It it was a weird injury, and like at the time that it happened, our singer is a chiropractor, or was in Delmer. He goes, "I hope it's broken."
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm on stage, it was in between songs, right? So I fell. Everybody thought at one point it was notorious. I just fell over, right? It was the whole muscle imbalance thing that I've corrected through weightlifting. That everybody like sat on the ground and didn't realize it was hurt, right? So for a whole song, I kept on putting like pressure on my leg to see like what was going on because it didn't hurt, but it kept on like it looked like an elbow instead of a knee. It was really weird, right? And then I was fascinated. I'm like, how does that even work? And then Chris turned around and was like, stop doing that. It's not supposed to happen that way. And I was like, oh, so we stopped the song. And then when he said, I hope it's broken, like, what does that mean? He goes, well, if it is what I think it is, you have a long journey to recovery. And he's like, I will explain it later. I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then went to, because he's like, you need x-ray. So I went to the ER and they're like, oh, it's just a sprain. Like, okay. They're like, here, wear this big brace. You can walk on it in 5 days. So of course, text Chris, like, this is what I told him. He's like, do not walk on it in 5 days. Come to find out, like, I ripped everything in between the two bones in my lower leg, right? So walking on it would have just ripped them further, right? So it was just like, I'm glad I had the person in the corner that knew exactly what it was, or it would have been worse, right? And just not realizing how long that would take to repair, right? So a break is what, a couple of months?
6 weeks usually.
6 weeks, yeah.
8 weeks, yeah.
This was 6 months before I could fully like have my leg rotate the right direction. And I lost 4 inches on that calf of just not using it. So like building that muscle back up and like fixing the ankle. And it was like, I understand now why he was like, hopefully it's broken.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a common thing in ankle injuries in particular. And also I'd be curious to hear your perspective of this, of knowing what you know now, of like, how much did also that expectation of, oh, this is serious and this is bad, how much did that actually negatively pay into your experience in your recovery?
It made me more careful. So usually, like, my shoulder hurts, sweet, it feels better, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to rest the whole time. It feels better, let's go. But that made me more cautious of like, okay, I'm going to keep the boot on. I'm going to do the exercises. Like, I don't want that to happen again, instead of just going full tilt of I know better. Right. So, it aided in my recovery a little bit of like, okay, let's be careful and not go too far too fast.
Sure. Great. Yeah, because it can be very much, other people can go into that, turn it into a fear of ever doing something, especially when pain is involved and injury is involved. And
I mean, I did struggle with that a little bit on trying to get squat depth for a while, right? Of like, put more weight on, but I don't have that like, what happens, right? Or like, there was a certain weight for a long time that you put it on the barbell and that would just start hurting. And I was like, and we had that conversation. He's like, is it really hurting or is it not? I'm like, okay, no, this is definitely just my brain. It's my leg can do plenty of that. It can jump on it. It's fine. It's healed. The doctor told me it's healed. Just let's work through the mental part of you're okay, right? Yeah. It's okay.
That stored memory of the pain in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be interesting to see over time on your breathwork journey of how what you learn and what you experience in that regard of being able to release some of that past pain from a physical level through breath.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, that's the next thing. That's my next chapter. I haven't got to that one yet.
getting a little ahead, but it's there's so much fascination there, and so much cool experience in all of that. And so as we're getting to the end of our time here today, anything that you want to let the listeners know of what you're doing, anything that you'd like to promote, anything that you'd like to bring forward into the world?
I guess if you're in the Fargo-Moorhead area, check out Save Me CJ. We have some in-town shows, one in September and then one in December, one in October.
Where can they learn more about that?
SaveMeCJ.com. We also have a Facebook page, so just go ahead, check that out. Come visit, say hi. I know I owe you some stuff, but the Varenyky will start up in just like the fall again, as we play less shows, have a little bit more time. So that's under Brandi's Kitchen. If anyone in the also in the greater North Dakota area, unfortunately I can't sell outside of North Dakota right now, is interested in checking out what a Varenyky is, that'll be up here again in the, like I said, the fall, winter. That's under brandiskitchen.com, I believe is what we used. And then, if you're interested in checking out Olympic weightlifting, I am the assistant coach over at Empower. So we also empowermindbodysoul.com. Come check us out. We are over by Drecker.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for jumping on with me today and sharing everything that you've learned, sharing your entire journey. It's been a pleasure and an honor to not only have been a participant in some of those experiences, but also getting to hear them again and getting to share them with the world. So thank you so much for being here today.
And thanks for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. And so with that, folks, we're closing out another episode of the Weird and Strong podcast. Until next time, stay strong, and most importantly, stay weird.